Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to the Downtown Club's gubernatorial forum. We'll just give it a few more minutes to let folks trickle in, and we'll get started right around 12:05. Thank you for coming. Good afternoon, everyone. Those of you coming in, thank you for joining us for the Downtown Club's Democratic Gubernatorial Forum. We're just going to give it a few more minutes as we wait for some more folks to trickle in, and then we'll begin with the candidates. Thanks so much. Okay, I think we can get started here. My name is Joshua Waterman. I am the co-president of Coalition for a District Alternative, along with Andrea Gordillo. On behalf of CODA and the other downtown Democratic clubs, which I have a list of somewhere here, Village Independent Democrats, Downtown Independent Democrats, Village Reform Democratic Club, United Democratic Organization, guys help me out.
Grand Street Dems.
Grand Street Dems, Where's my script? We would all like to welcome you to the this forum, New Downtown Dems. Thanks, Jake. New Downtown Dems. We'd like to welcome you to the our gubernatorial forum today, where we'll be joined by three candidates running for governor, which will be Congressman Tom Suozzi, Public Advocate Jumaane Williams, and in lieu of Kathy Hochul, we're going to be joined by the Lieutenant Governor Brian Benjamin. And so the format will be as such. We're going to have 5 minutes for the candidate, and then we'll do a 15-minute question and answer. We're going to start with pre-submitted questions from our members, and if there's time left over, we will move to the Q&A feature on Zoom. So if you have questions for the candidates, please put them into the Q&A. We're just going to give it 1 minute. There was a little scheduling mishap as we wait for everyone to get on, and we'll get started in just a few minutes. While we have a moment here, just waiting for the candidates, I'd just like to remind CODA members that following this meeting, we'll be endorsing in this race as well as the other races that we discussed last week. And for the other clubs, obviously, hopefully when you'll be endorsing. But for CODA members, we'll be on after this. Thank you. And my fellow presidents here on the panel, if you guys have any updates, feel free to go around with that. Sorry for the late start, everyone. We're just a few moments away from our first candidate. And I see the congressman has just hopped on. If we can promote him to panelist, we can get Tom Suozzi onto the panel and we can get underway here. Cameron, are you able to do that from on your end?
Mara actually has to do it because she's Mara. I'm not a host yet.
And there she did.
You did it.
Hi, you guys.
Good afternoon, Congressman. Thank you so much thank you for joining us here this afternoon, this snowy afternoon.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. I think I was
Absolutely.
supposed to come on later, but they told me to come on earlier.
I apologize for the mix-up. We're glad to have you. We appreciate your time. Whenever you're ready, we'll have a 5-minute introduction, and then we'll do 15 minutes of question and answer. Take it away, sir.
Okay. All right. So good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for doing this, and I appreciate your time. I'm Tom Suozzi. I'm running for governor of New York. I'm currently serve in Congress from Queens and Long Island. And when I look at the governor's race, I think people are going to look at 3 factors. Number 1, what's your experience? What's your approach is number 2. And number 3, what's your vision? So experience. I'm the only candidate in the race that has proven executive experience. I was trained as a certified public accountant, worked for Arthur Anderson and Company. Then I was trained as a lawyer. I clerked for the chief judge of the Eastern District of New York. And then I worked for Sherman and Sterling. Then I was the mayor of my hometown, small city of Glen Cove, for 8 years, really learned about how government works and got a lot done. Then I was the county executive of Nassau County. Nassau County is larger than 11 states. It was rated the worst run county in America before I got there, and we dramatically turned it around. And I ran for governor against Eliot Spitzer. That didn't turn out very well for me. Didn't turn out very well for Eliot Spitzer, as we know. I lost my reelection for county executive after 8 years. The guy that beat me was convicted of bribery and corruption. So the rule is, you can run against me, but if you beat me, your life is doomed after that. So don't beat me in the race. Anyway, so then I was in the private sector again, and now I've been in Congress for the past 5 years. And I love Congress. I'm on Ways and Means. I've got great relationships with my colleagues. I get a lot of stuff done, but I feel like our state's in a lot of trouble. So, and I feel like our country's in a lot of trouble. I feel like our Democratic Party's in a lot of trouble. We got a lot of trouble. We got to fix a lot of problems. So number one, I have the proven executive experience. Nobody else has the background that I do as far as running big governments and making government work and turning it around. And that really matters when you've got a $220 billion enterprise that's larger than any Fortune 500 company. Our state is very poorly run, and it has been for a long time. A lot of times you have lawyers that make good speeches that run things, and that they're not the ones who are best equipped to run big things. Second is my approach. I'm a common sense Democrat. I'll work with anybody. I'll work with progressives. I'll work with moderates. I'll work with Republicans. I'll work with Democrats. I'll work with anybody to get the job done to actually make people's lives better. I'm a lifelong Democrat. You look at any Democratic issue, I've got a great rating. I've got, I was the environmentalist of the year for all of New York State for the New York League of Conservation Voters. I was the person of the year for the New York City Immigration Coalition. I have a 100% rating from Planned Parenthood. I have an F rating from the NRA. You name any Democratic group rating, I've got good grades. But I'm also a very practical person. I want to get stuff done and solve problems and help people. I've been doing that my whole life throughout my history in politics. I want to get things done. So the third factor is your vision for the future. I've laid out 4 things that are my priorities. There's a lot more things out there, but my 4 big priorities are: crime is number 1. It's a major problem. We see it getting really hot right now in the city of New York. It's been a challenge that we've had to face for a while. 2 is taxes. Property taxes are very regressive. People can't afford to pay them. We have the highest taxes in America. We lost 300,000 people in New York State in the past year alone, more than any other state in the United States of America. When I was born, I'm 59 years old. When I was born, there were 45 members of Congress from New York State. Today, there are only 27 members of Congress from New York State, and it's going down to 26 with the new census. And we will continue to erode unless we figure out how to deal with the issue of crime and taxes. Third is the environment. I'll always continue to push for the environment. It's a very important issue to me. I'm very committed to it throughout my career. And fourth is our troubled schools. 75% of the people in jail have a drug, alcohol, or mental health problem. 50% of the people at Rikers Island have a learning disability. The problems of society are related to drugs, alcohol, and mental health, a lot of dysfunction that we have in our society. And these problems emerge at young ages. If you look at 3rd grade test scores in the best school district and the most at-risk school districts, they're very similar, 3rd grade. By 8th grade, the good school districts, the kids are skyrocketing, and the kids in the at-risk school districts have fallen off the face of the earth. We have to change our whole mindset and take all of our social services, all of our programs that we have funded by the federal government, the state government, the local government, the not-for-profits, and push them into our schools so that we can help children at young ages when they need the help. Our whole society now is set up to help people when they show up at the window when they're an adult and they're already in so much trouble with an emergency assistance.
30 seconds on opening statement.
What's that?
30 seconds on the opening statement, then Q&A.
Okay. So we have to try and bring all of our services into our schools. I know how to run government. When I was county executive, I did a thing called No Wrong Door. I took social services, health, mental health, veterans, seniors, youth, physically challenged, drug and alcohol. They were in 5 separate locations. I put them in one building. When somebody comes in for a welfare payment, for a SNAP, for Medicaid assistance, for a housing voucher, whatever it may be, what's the problem going on in that person's life? And if you bring this to children in schools, they're a captive audience. They have to go to school. You can also find out what's going on with their families. Let's address the problems. Is there a mental health issue? Are you a veteran with post-traumatic stress disorder? Or you have a physical challenge? Is there something going on at your home life? Is there domestic violence? Let's solve the problem. It'll actually help people, and it will save money in the process. So I can do it because I've done it. I love government. I love public service. I'm giving up a great gig in Congress. It's a great honor, great responsibility, because I believe so strongly that our country and our state and our party are in so much trouble because we're doing too much pandering to the extremes in our country instead of working together to actually solve problems. That's what I want to do. And I'll take any questions you have.
Thank you, Congressman, for that. So I've got a few questions here from our members that were asked ahead of time. And like I mentioned earlier to our members here, if anyone has any further questions, please just put them in the Q&A and we will we'll get to them if we have the time. So first, I'd love to start with housing. Nycha has been chronically underfunded, lacking an adequate operating subsidy, as well as over $40 billion needed to address its capital needs. Whether or not the federal government funds public housing, the state must invest in capital and operating funds for Nycha. How will you work to allocate funds to Nycha? And on that note, what is your current position on the blueprint proposal, and what is your position on RAD?
So I'm not sure what you're referring to with blueprint and RAD. I apologize, but I've been a major proponent in Congress to push for a dramatic increase in funding for Nycha. I'm a big supporter of public housing and getting more money into public housing. But the problem with public housing in New York City is that it's just badly run. I ran a public housing authority, or I appointed people to the board of a public housing authority when I was the mayor of my hometown, Glen Cove. I dealt with a lot of public housing issues. The challenge is that these big, huge government structures that are run very poorly, they're managed poorly. That's the problem with most of government, is it's big, it's giant, there's lots of money involved, and it's run terribly. And we have to figure out how to make things more effective to run them better. I know how to run things well. I'm in favor of funding public housing. I believe in public housing. One of the big challenges I've found with public housing is that if you have all senior citizens in a building, you find that the building is like impeccably kept. It's in good shape. It's saved people's lives. It's fantastically better. When you try and take all poor people and put them in one location in public housing, you have somebody in one apartment that's, getting up early to go to work every day, is doing everything responsible, and down the hall there's a couple kids that are smoking pot in the hallway and just staying up all night long and keeping other people up. And when the people leave public housing, they get replaced by somebody else who's a person facing a tough circumstance. So it's a big challenge to put all these people in one location. That's why housing choice vouchers and Section 8 housing are so great, because they spread affordable housing all throughout the communities as opposed to all in one location the way they currently are. So we need to manage our public housing authorities much better. We need to be looking at public-private partnerships wherever possible to try and manage them better. And we need more funding for public housing. But managing them well is a very, very important part of it.
Great, thank you. I've got one more question on housing to pivot a bit. Question on single-family zoning from CODA member Jake Wolf. You recently came out against the governor's plan to eliminate single-family zoning laws. What would you say to our members who feel that the home rule policy has done too little to integrate historically segregated suburban communities, and that general aspirations to build up around downtown train stations has been proven impossible due to single-family zoning?
Well, first, let me take the second part first. Okay, I've been a huge proponent of transit-oriented development for a long time. When I was county executive, even when I was mayor, my hometown, we've built like 25% increase in housing over the past 5 years based upon the stuff that I laid the groundwork for when I was mayor of my hometown. But I started a thing called Cool Downtowns and a thing called New Suburbia, where I talked about how in order for suburbia to survive, we have to expand our tax base because we have these incredibly high taxes, and we need to attract young people to come and live here. Because as you all know, young people don't want to come out to suburbia. In the old days, people got married in their early 20s. Now, if they get married, they'll get married in their 30s. And from those 20 to 30s, we have no young people moving to suburbia, or we didn't. So we had to build housing in our downtown areas to create exciting, what I called cool downtowns at the time. Cool is not a cool expression anymore, but when I used it, it was cool downtowns, to try and encourage us to go up to build more rental housing in our downtowns near our train stations. And I've been successful in changing the mindset throughout Long Island and getting a lot more downtown development to take place in different communities like Farmingdale, like Freeport, to encourage it more in Mineola and in places that had it already, like Great Neck and Rockville Center. So it's happening, but I believe very strongly in local control. I believe it's the bedrock of local government. And if people don't like what the local government is doing, they need to get involved. They need to run for office, and they need to change the local zoning. The historic problems of segregation on Long Island are very real. There's no question about it. It's, you know, it's a whole thing of Levittown and redlining and freezing people out. There have been efforts, and there's starting to be more success in trying to change that. But it requires local control, and it takes local involvement. I do not want the state of New York saying, this is the rule where we're going to require you to have accessory dwelling units in every single community. We're going to require you to do transit-oriented development in certain locations. It's up to the local folks to decide how to do the development. I'm very in favor of transit-oriented development. I'm very in favor of affordable housing. I have fought for those things throughout my career, and I will continue to fight for them. But I do not believe it's the job of the governor of New York State to implement her will or the state legislature's will on local governments, and I will fight strongly against that from happening.
Thank you. Moving on to public safety, something of a little two-parter here, trying to squeeze all the questions into our 15. Firstly, do you support Eric Adams' suggestion to repeal bail reform laws and increase police presence and plainclothes police presence? If so, how will you minimize the negative consequences that historically underserved communities have suffered under these policies? And then just related to that, I read recently you had discussed the role, how Alvin Bragg's performance has been so far, and what you might do with that function if you were to be the governor. Can you talk a bit both about the police presence and then about your relationship with the DA?
So I absolutely don't think we should repeal bail reform. I think that it makes cash bail is unfair. I ran a jail in Nassau County. I saw people where they'd come in with the exact same misdemeanor. They'd have the same bail for $100 even, or $200 or $300 or $500, and somebody would get out right away, and another person would languish in jail because they couldn't pay $100, $200, $300, $500. And we used to actually raise money from the private sector from people to get their bail paid to get them out of jail. It doesn't make sense that people are held in jail for low-level offenses. So we should not repeal the cash bail reform that we did in New York State, but it has to be fixed. Every other state in the United States of America has said that judges have to have the discretion to look at the dangerousness or public safety implications of the people that are before them. If somebody comes in for a low-level crime, a low-level offense, I should even say, they're going to get let out right away under the no cash bail idea. But what if this person's record was that they were involved in 4 violent felonies in the past, that they had gun possession issues, and they had armed robbery, or they had other violent felonies in the past? That the judge has to have the discretion to look at that person's history to determine whether or not there's a danger there. So I'm a very big believer in prevention. Okay, I talked about 75% of the people in jail with drug, alcohol, and mental health problem. 50% of the people at Rikers have a learning disability. We need to do a much better job, as Desmond Tutu used to say. Eric Adams quoted him often. He said, "We spent a lifetime pulling people out of the river. We need to go upstream and stop people from falling in the river in the first place." I believe in mental health courts. I believe in drug and alcohol courts. I believe in veterans courts. I believe in alternatives to incarceration. I believe in preventing crime from happening by helping our children make it in school in the first place and have opportunity to succeed by addressing the problems of life that they face at young ages before they become big problems later on. But those are all prevention aspects that often take time to address. You cannot at the same time ignore what's going on the ground. You have to have not just prevention, you have to have intervention. You have to stop crime from happening. You cannot let crime happen. It's a green light for chaos. When Alvin Bragg said, "I'm not going to prosecute resisting arrest, and I'm going to lower armed robbery down to a misdemeanor," that is bad. If you want to change the law, then run for a state legislature to change the law. as a district attorney, your job is to enforce the law. It can't be that the law, it's illegal to do an armed robbery in Queens or in Brooklyn, but it's okay in Manhattan. It's, it's illegal to resist arrest in Brooklyn or in the Bronx, but it's okay in Manhattan. That is a green light for chaos. I'm totally opposed to it. And the governor has the power to remove a district attorney. It's unlikely, it's very hard to happen, or to have the attorney general step in and remove the district attorney on a particular case with the attorney general will prosecute instead. I will do that. I spoke out against Alvin Bragg's policies right away, and I've come out strong against it, and the governor still hasn't said anything about it. She had a meeting with him yesterday and she said, I made it clear I want you to work on this, but I will step in and address that issue.
Absolutely. And we have a representative from her on later today, and obviously we'll be talking about that with them as well. Real quick, a more theoretical question. You bring up incarceration. What to you is the function of incarceration to society?
I think there's two parts. One is punitive and two is rehabilitation. There are two parts of incarceration. One is to say, listen, there are consequences for you. Oh no, three parts. One is punitive, to say when you commit a crime, that's a bad thing, we're going to hold you accountable for it. Two is to try and rehabilitate people. And three is to actually protect the public, is to make sure that people that are dangerous and that have no regard for the law are held accountable. But again, like I said, 75% of the people in jail have a drug, alcohol, or mental health issue. We need to address those issues more effectively in society. I've done that as county executive of Nassau County. I actually started a program where I brought my no wrong door concept of those 8 agencies I talked about that I put in one location into a school district. Unfortunately, it was my last year in office, and I didn't get a chance to do it all the way. I'm most passionate of all the issues we talked about. The thing I most want to do as governor of New York State is to work together with places like New York City, with the mayor, with other places throughout the state, with troubled school districts, and bring our social services into our school districts, so that the idea of community schools or the Harlem Children's Zone, or during the mayor's race, there's a guy, Ray McGuire, talked about from cradles to careers. We need to change our whole mentality of bringing services to young people at young ages before problems of life become much bigger problems.
Great, thank you. Let's move on to the environment. Our communities here in Lower Manhattan are a stone's throw, obviously, from a pair of rivers. With rising sea levels and higher frequency of superstorms, what plans do you have for a resilient climate future for our communities?
This is why Build Back Better is so important to New York as well as to the whole country. There's so much money in there for not only to prevent worsening climate change by moving away from fossil fuels, but also to invest in resiliency to deal with the rising sea levels that are going to be coming. There's a lot of big dramatic ideas out there. I don't know if you want to speak specifically about, what the Army Corps is talking about building these gates and things like that, but we have to have a more resilient shoreline. When I first got to Congress, I was on armed services. And the only place that we got the Republicans to pay attention to climate change was related to our 5-year military posture, where we persuaded the Republicans on armed services, except for one, Liz Cheney, who I respect and admire for what she's doing with Trump right now. But she voted against taking into account climate change for our long-term military posture, because it's real. Everybody knows it's real that sea levels are rising. And so I'm just bringing up the example of the federal government and the armed services is, that's going to affect ports. That's going to affect where our Navy is based. It's going to affect people migrating from one area to another area because they have a drought and they have no water anymore. The wars of the future are not going to be about oil and land. They're going to be about water. So this is very real, and we have to invest in resiliency of seawalls and stopping sea level rising from flooding our subway systems, from flooding our tunnels, from flooding people's homes, killing people like it did in the storm that we recently had that killed people in Queens in basement apartments, which is another big danger of accessory dwelling units. When we're going to try and legalize things that are dangerous and have historically been illegal because there's no access, no egress in dangerous situations. So I I believe that we have to invest in that. We need money. And that's why we need the federal government to really help us a lot, because New York State already has the highest taxes in America. Why are taxes high? I'm the biggest proponent in all of Congress for the state and local tax deduction. I'm the leader of that issue, to fight to get us a state and local tax deduction back. And we're never going to get the whole thing back because the Republicans are against us. And even some of the progressives, I think wrongheadedly, are against us on that because they see it as a tax cut for the rich. But in reality, it's a tax cut for New York State. And the way New York State, the reason New York State's taxes are higher is because we are progressive. We have the lowest rates of uninsured children in the country. We have the lowest rates of uninsured adults in the children. We're some of the highest rates of uninsured children and adults. Florida and Texas, where they have very low taxes. We have high taxes because we have a mass transit system. They don't have a mass transit system in Florida and Texas the way that we do. They don't believe in climate change. We're addressing climate change in New York, but it costs more money. It causes higher state and local taxes. They don't believe in climate change in Florida and Texas. They think it's a hoax still. So whatever the issue, we pay our teachers more, we pay our cops more, we pay our civil servants more. We have unions. You know, we pay everybody more because we have unions in New York State. They don't believe in unions in Florida and Texas. So we are losing influence in our country every single year as people leave New York State and other states grow so rapidly because we have these high taxes and because we're now having a quality of life problem related to crime and other issues. We have to make New York State attractive again. And that's taxes is a very big part of that issue. So I know I kind of went off the topic.
Sure. No, I mean, it's all intersectional, right? So we're
Josh,
just
just time for one more.
we're just about out of time. I have one last question. I'd love to challenge you to answer in as few words as possible, which I know is always a challenge. You refer to yourself as a common sense Democrat who holds progressive and conservative positions. Are you able to tell us a more progressive position you hold and a more maybe conservative position you hold?
So progressive, I'm like, over the top on the environment and over the top on immigration. I mean, my father was born in Italy, came to the United States as a young boy. I opened the first day worker shape-up center anywhere on the East Coast of the United States of America in 1994. I kicked ICE out of Nassau County when I was Nassau County executive, and our police wouldn't work with them. So I'm incredibly progressive when it comes, I'm on the Green New Deal. I'm on, when it comes to the environment, when it comes to immigration, I'm as progressive as you can get. When it comes to financing, and we can't keep on raising taxes in New York State. It's just people are leaving. They can't afford to live here. Our utility rates are too high. Our taxes are too high. People can't afford to stay here. And we will not survive as a state for the long term and be competitive if we keep our taxes up so high.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. And thank you for keeping it succinct. You got all the information out. Once again, we appreciate your time. We're going to move on to our next candidate. I so appreciate you coming here this afternoon, Congressman. Thanks again.
All right, Joshua. Thanks very much. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. Thank Marion. Thank you, Mar. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Cameron. Thank you, Denny. Thank you, Chung Sato. Hey, Chung. Hi. Thank you, Meg. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Vid. Thank you, Meg Pascarella. And hello, Jumani. I love Jumani. Jumani and I, he'll tell you we don't agree on a lot of stuff, but I have such respect and admiration for him. He is a really an exceptional person, and I'm glad to know him and even getting to know him more as we go through this process and we hear the tail end of each other's remarks all the time. All right. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you, Congressman. Have a great rest of your day. Enjoy the snow.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving right along to, well, you see him here, New York City Public Advocate, Jumani Williams. Jumani, we're going to do a 5-minute introduction for you, and then we'll do a 15-minute Q&A. And once again, to our members, we've got some pre-asked questions, and we'll be going to the Q&A in the Zoom function if we have time for any more. But Jumani, the floor is yours, 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Joshua. Peace and blessings, love and light to everybody, all 7 groups who are on. Really critical, the backbone of the work that we do, as was mentioned. Jumani Williams, Public Advocate. Thanks to many of the groups on the call, I am the Public Advocate, and I'm running to be governor of the state of New York. A lot of you know I got my start in community organizing, tenant organizing, housing to be exact. It was long before Barack Obama, so no one had any idea what that was. And my mother asked me to please get a real job. I had to convince her that it actually was a real job. And then I ran for council, being an incumbent. I've been trying to stir up the pot ever since then, and quite successfully, I think. I ran for lieutenant governor in 2018. Again, thanks to some of you who had the courage to join. At that time, people thought we didn't have a shot. And it turns out with no money at all, being outraised even more than we're being outraised now, we got 47% of the vote across the state, 55% in this city, which showed that our message worked. And we said at that time, what if we had someone who had the courage to stand up and speak out when so many things were going wrong in this state, even if it was against a powerful governor. And we did that. And we got more votes than any non-white candidate ever in a statewide primary. We got more votes than we got the top 3 most votes ever. Unfortunately, the first 2 were the governor, lieutenant governor, but I think it was still really good, and we were able to turn that into being the public advocate. And I'm quite concerned now because I keep hearing our leaders say we have to return to normal. And I'm saying, no, we don't. Normal didn't work for most of us on this call. It didn't work for the city. It didn't work for the state. Matter of fact, that's how we got here. We lost tens of thousands of New Yorkers because of poor decisions during the pandemic and not having addressed the issues that we all care about during and before the pandemic. The one thing we can do in their memory is not return to normal. And when I listened to the State of the State address, the address was okay, but really it said to me that could have been given before the pandemic. It doesn't meet the moment that we're in right now. One of the biggest things that struck me was the governor letting the eviction moratorium lapse, no assistance for tenants or people going to foreclosure, and no good cause was remarkable. And then on top of that, 100,000 units to preserve and build says to me you don't understand the magnitude of the housing homelessness crisis, or you just don't have the courage to address it. And when I look at the filings and I see the amount of money, the obnoxious amount of money coming from real estate that went to the last administration, now going to the current administration, it leads you to believe that that might be the reason some of these decisions are being made. And we need someone who understands where we are in time in this state. We need someone who has a bold vision of what we can do. I'm often was told that I have to choose between being a activist and being a elected official. And I said, no, you don't. The best elected officials are activists. And so we sought out to show that you can be both and that you can be accomplished. And so I always tell folks, see me in the streets and I speak up, but I've been able to show you can accomplish things in government. You can get things done. I've passed over 70 pieces of legislation in the city council. Just my 2 years of public advocate, we've passed more bills than any other public advocate before, almost all of them combined. The way we've gotten things funded when people say we couldn't, the way we've had electoral success shows me that you don't have to make the decisions the way it's made in Albany. And yes, you can get rid of the head, which was the governor, but there's a lot of muscle memory in Albany. And I'm worried that someone who's come up through that way is going to make decisions the same way. And when we see what's going on now around the issues of housing, public safety, the transformative economy, saying that you're not even going to raise revenue options at all means that we won't be able to fund housing properly, healthcare, so many other issues that have intersectionality when it comes to things like public safety. I have that big, bold vision, and I have a way to get it done. And we've shown that it's successful and possible. We have momentum on our side now. We're just getting so many endorsements coming in from local council members, people across the state, even more in some places than we had at the end of the last campaign. Just got endorsed by New York Communities for Change, Make the Road New York. And we know that some others are coming. I'd love for these groups to join me one more time. And really, let's help New Yorkers believe in what is possible in this state. Thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to hearing any questions you may have.
Awesome. We have a handful. Thank you for that. You talk about housing. Let's start with housing like we often do. So Nycha, as you know, has been chronically underfunded, lacking an adequate operating subsidy, as well as over $40 billion needed to address the capital needs. Whether or not the federal government funds public housing, the state must invest in capital and operating funds for Nycha. How will you work to allocate funds to Nycha? And relatedly, what is your current position on the Nycha blueprint proposal and on RAD?
It's interesting because I will tell you, having traveled across the state, some of these concerns and questions they make you believe there's an upstate, downstate division where there isn't. And so housing, even public housing, is the same all across. Now, there are some regional differences and cultural differences you want to respect, but everywhere I go, people are looking to Albany. Here in New York City, Nycha has been at the top of the worst landlord list in the public advocate's office for the past 2 or 3 years, so much so that we have to put them in their own category because they win all the time. We can't look at the private ones. So we have to put them in a special winners category, which makes no sense. As you mentioned, they've been zeroed out in funding in the state for too long. We've heard promises during election time that never make its way after election time. And so I definitely am committed to making sure that Nycha is funded. I definitely also understand that management is also a problem. So you can throw as much money as you want to a place. If you don't have the people managing it properly, it's an issue. The last administration really lied about things like lead poisoning and lead paint. And it was just reprehensible what I saw there. And so both of those things are very important. We have to have someone who understands that, understands the housing conditions, period, who understands that you can't talk about housing and homelessness separately because most homelessness is a result of not having income targeted housing that people can afford. And you have to have someone who's going to understand that revenue raises are important if we're going to address the housing crisis in any real way. And in terms of Blueprint and RAD, there are major concerns. I've tried to let tenants really lead the conversation there, and there were some few who were for and a lot who were against. But I really think it's important for the tenants to lead that conversation. We do know we need this steady stream of income. Unfortunately, even some of the early results are showing a higher rate of evictions than promised. And so that doesn't seem like that might be the best path to get it done. But we do need investment on every level, actually, city, state, and federal.
Thank you. You mentioned in your introduction good cause eviction. Can you just confirm that if Harvey Epstein's bill were to pass the legislature and get to a Governor Williams' desk, would you sign and support good cause eviction?
I mean, I want to help him get it done. I don't want to wait for it to get on my desk. You know, when I was a tenant organizer and tenants would come to my office and ask for repairs, I had to say to them, are you rent regulated? Because if you're not, I might be able to help you get that repair, but you may not get a lease renewal. And the tenant, the landlord may just jack up your rent like they did to two of my staff people just yesterday, 40% and 60%. And oftentimes people think of rent regulation as just a price point, which is important. But the fact that you can get a lease renewal is significantly important so that you can actually use the other rights that you have without fear of being evicted. And there's so many protections that are listed in that gun cause bill. It is the floor of what we need to be doing. And so I want to actively help that get done.
Great, thank you. Lower Manhattan is one of the most socially stratified places in America. We have working class communities living a few blocks from the richest people on the planet. As governor, how will you support social mobility that will counteract entrenched power and market forces? What can you do as governor in a radical way that has not been done before? You know, first, you can't receive all of your money from the richest people in the state. That just doesn't make sense. And when you look at the filings, we all should be very worried. I think 0.07% came from people with 250 or below. Now, everyone needs to have a voice in our state, but they shouldn't have an outsized voice simply because they can literally write $100,000 checks. And I want to have a transformative economy. I want to have economic democracy. That makes sense to me. You know, it seems scary to a lot of folks. There's a group called Patriotic Millionaires, actually, that I've agreed with for quite some time as they put forth measures to help us get to some of those things. And, you know, to the last candidate, there has been no proof of people leaving because of fair taxes. It's just not a true thing. What we have seen, and for some reason we always talk about people can't afford to live here, but it's actually the people who are working and working class folks, Black and brown communities, low income, middle income people who can't afford to live here are moving. We've seen people moving because of remote options more available, and they're not getting paid enough in their working class and middle class jobs. We haven't seen people moving because of fairer taxes. It's just not the case. What we have to do is have a conversation about civic responsibility.
if you are a multimillionaire, you have a civic responsibility to help make sure that this state remains the way it is. And so I want to have that conversation a little differently. Sometimes we tend to start screaming at folks, but in this case, I think I want to bring folks to the table and say, look, we all have a civic responsibility to do what we can with what we have. Otherwise, we fail. And so even the small things that the governor agrees on has no way to actually fund it because we're relying on the state as the federal government money that's going to run out. We have 4 years coming up. This is a unique time that we've never had. And so if you want to simply return to normal and do the things that got us into this pandemic, we won't get out from where we need to go. And I think we have the understanding. I ran on this in 2018. That's a message that I know works. We unfortunately don't have Democratic candidates who have the courage to have this conversation. I do, and I've seen it be successful. Lastly, I'll say something as simply as funding our public schools, public education like CUNY. One of the first reports that we put out was showing how CUNY allows people to go to the middle class in a way as an engine that we haven't seen before. And it should be free like it was before the melanin change in the 1970s. And the biggest expansion of CUNY happened, by the way, during the Great Depression, because people said that was the way to help folks get out of this mess. And so the first report, one of the first reports we put out was about that. And as governor, I'm so happy to have the tools that I've never had to actually just make these things happen in a real way.
Thank you. You mentioned education. I'd like to pivot there with a question from Patricia Larea. What will you do to help improve the learning disabilities you speak of affecting our incarcerated and education system? Dyslexia affects as many as 5 to 20% of the population, regardless of language or background, and represents 80 to 90% of all those with learning disabilities.
Yeah, I'm a public school baby, New York City public school baby. From preschool to master's, educated in the public school system. I love it. I also have Tourette's syndrome and ADHD. Made it through that. Having those things, being a young Black kid with locks who loves hip hop, can get precarious at sometimes. And so I was happy to make it through. I was happy that I had a mom who actually had the ability to shift around her job and get to that school every time, which was a lot. I was in trouble. A single mom who raised 2 knuckle-headed children. I think we turned out okay. I always shout out my 5th grade teacher, Miss Jeannie Ned, who actually, if we had our inauguration this year, was going to be holding the Bible when I did when I took my words. That's how much she's meant to my life. Understanding that teachers aren't just babysitters; they actually are integral in someone, getting to their full potential. And it says to me, I'm concerned because I think right now I may not have made it through the system because Miss Ned might have been teaching to the test, and my mother's voice might not have been heard in the same way. So one, I don't know where folks are, but I don't support mayoral control. I support municipal control. I think just having one person hasn't shown that we need to get the changes we do. So municipal control will bring some more voices in that will help us. And we fundamentally understand that there are so many people sitting in Rikers Island, and maybe half that have dyslexia. Rikers Island is also the largest mental health institution in North America. That's for another question. But we have to dedicate resources specifically to people with learning disabilities and in communities that are not getting their fair resources. There's some schools, by the way, that don't even have a sports program. That doesn't make any sense. And again, what we need is additional infusion of money in these areas for specific programs like those for people with learning disabilities. We also need better management. There's been a lot of waste in the Department of Education for a very long time. And I'm hoping to make sure that change happens. But I'll guarantee you, again, you go across the state, the same communities are dealing with the same issues that we're talking about right here and are looking for Albany and a leader to help bring us together to solve them.
That actually segues right into my next question. Obviously, so much of the job of governor is as a manager, overseeing so many different agencies. What managerial experience will you be able to bring to the position from your time in council and as public advocate?
I have had the pleasure of being able to manage folks, I think, since I was 22, 23. And I see a few grades coming in. And so it's let me know it's been several decades. I've learned and fine-tuned different management styles that work. But I also have been able to put that management and executive experience into getting things done in government. And that's really important. I will match my record of accomplishments because of the help that I received from people even on this call and people who are listening and doing the work from the ground up to anyone I'm running against, including, you can't compare the powers of the governor, but if you look before that, what we've been able to accomplish in the way we were told we couldn't do it is a testament to the way we believe government should be helping people. And I always say I didn't get elected to get reelected, and I didn't get elected to go to higher office. I would love to do both of those things, to be clear, but I got elected to do a job. That's it. So sometimes I'm even surprised I'm a citywide elected official. I'm very proud of it. But wherever I get elected to, it's to do as much, I call it, damage as possible, to change the way decisions are made, to shake up the status quo, because the status quo exists to get people elected and reelected. We need a functioning government that is doing it on behalf of the people. Not only do I have belief in that, I have a consistent belief. I've shown that, and we have shown that we have the ability to actually get government to work if you have someone who has the courage to take the political risks. And I'm not only have the courage to do it, I'm very proud to do it. I'd rather have lost my election in LG than to have won it in any other way. But what I do know now is that we have a path here. It's uphill, but most of our battles have been. And the momentum is on our side right now. And I think it would be amazing if we can show the country that New York is actually not going to return to normal. We're going to have someone who's going to address the concerns that we've been fighting for such a long time. And had we done that, we might not have been the epicenter of the epicenter in this pandemic.
Next question from Chung Sito, president of United Democratic Organization. Chung asks, anti-Asian hate crimes continue to rise in New York. The Asian American community continues to ask for support, yet the commitments have yet to arrive to the community organizations. What specific plans do you have, in addition to what has already been provided, that will protect the Asian American community, help those needing mental health services and treatments, and move unhoused individuals to supportive housing and services?
Thank you, Chung, who's just always doing such great work. And I want to thank Chung and others from UDO and the Asian community who were out 2 years ago, who were saying Black Lives Matter. That was amazing to see the cross-section of support that we had. And I'm proud to have stood with Chung and others 2 years ago, even when the anti-Asian sentiment was increasing, saying we are going to stand together when any one of us are harmed. I was glad to stand 6, 7, 8 years ago in the council when the Asian community was saying their groups were not getting the funding they deserve. I'm going to continue to do that. And so we absolutely have to get the funding to these communities. And we have to get it fast. Sometimes we're going to say we're going to get it, and then you can't draw it down. So we have to get it fast. 2, we should call out anti-Asian hate every time it happens. That's one of the ways that we can push back on it. But 3, and I'm so thankful for that question, the mental health services are missing, right? They're just not there. One of the first reports we put out was how the city can do better at building out a mental health infrastructure. We couldn't get this administration, the previous administration, to agree with us. And so we said, put out a 988 number so that people aren't calling 911, so they can get the health response that they need, not a criminal response. Let's take some of that $2 billion you're spending on Thrive and build out respite centers so people can get the help they need and the long-term care. Our mentally ill New Yorkers should not be living in the subway and should not be living in Rikers Island. They should be getting the assistance that they heard. The terrible tragedy of Miss Go should shake us all awake. It's horrific and tragic. And then the person who did that, their family was saying, we were begging for help. We wanted the assistance and we failed. And so I'm so glad when we hear people trying to have a real conversation without pushing the hysteria that others are doing, that understands the intersection of safety. And also, lastly, I'm happy that this administration is trying to send out teams that deal with, train with mental health. What we do know is we don't need to have law enforcement right away with them. Our law enforcement partners have an important role to play. I just went to the funeral of Officer Rivera. It was so heartbreaking to hear. And so we know that they do. but we also want to be fair to them by not putting them in situations that they don't have to be in. So our professionals should go out, do the assessment. If they need law enforcement, they can call them. If not, let's get them to the help that they need. It's really important that we build out infrastructure, and we start doing it now. Again, as I travel the state, this is the same problem in municipalities all across the state. Someone has to have the courage to do it and not feed the fears.
And with that, perfect timing. We're gonna have to leave it at that. We thank you so much for your time and your answers today. Obviously, you have all of our congratulations. I know you have a baby on the way. Hope the family is well, and we so appreciate you once again, Jamani. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Peace and blessing, love and light to everyone. We didn't get to really get to a public safety question, but maybe I can come back sometime and really talk about that in a way that keeps us safe, that acknowledges our law enforcement roles. But we have so many other parts that we have to play there that we need to get structured and funded.
Absolutely. 15 minutes is pushing it for anybody. We could do hours of this stuff, but we all want to go play in the snow, and I know you got things to get onto as well. So thank you for your time, and we'll see you later on. Great. At this point, I'm gonna hand it off to my friend and co-president, Andrea Gordillo, who will introduce the next candidate.
Thank you, Josh. And thanks again, everyone, for being here. Okay, so we are next up. I don't know if they're in the panelist section yet. I'll give it a minute for them to enter. Okay, yes, so we have Lieutenant Governor Brian Benjamin back this week, this time representing Governor Kathy Hochul. And just as a quick reminder, all candidates are given 5 minutes and then 15 minutes of question and answer. And for our attendees, if you could please submit your questions to the Q&A function on the bottom of your screen. We will not accept the questions from the chat. So take it away, Lieutenant Governor Benjamin. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I want to thank CODA, Downtown Independent Democrats, Village Independent Democrats, Village Reform Democratic Club, UDO, Grant Street Democrats, and New Downtown Democrats for hosting this conversation. My name is Lieutenant Governor, and I'm here on behalf of Governor Kathy Hochul. Let me start off by talking about public safety. One of the most important priorities that we have in the state is to keep everyone safe. As many of us have seen the funeral yesterday for Jason Rivera, Officer Rivera, and there have been a lot of conversations around public safety, bail reform. So let me talk about a few points on that. Number one, the governor met with Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg yesterday. They both left that meeting confident that we will work together to ensure that we have public safety and fairness, public safety and justice. The governor, when I first became lieutenant governor, signed the Less is More Act, which is a bill I carried in the Senate, which says that if you are out on parole, a technical violation should not be a reason why you get reincarcerated. She has a vision around making sure that we have a society where the young person who doesn't have money is not put in a position whereby they might be sitting in Rikers for 3 years, where someone who has money has the opportunity to get out. So let me say a couple points on this. Number one, there have been some misconceptions about bail reform. First and foremost, bail reform was not the cause of some of the most recent issues that we have seen, and was not playing a role within that. Number two, District Attorney Alvin Bragg has not said in any way, shape, or form that he will allow for armed robbery to be a situation whereby someone who's carrying a gun would not get prosecuted. There are a lot of falsehoods out there. I'm happy to talk about these things more specifically in Q&A if there's of interest, but the governor's taking a level-headed approach to this, and she wants to make sure we have safety in public, and safety and fairness. Secondly, we want to track and trace these illegal guns that are on our streets. We cannot only focus on what happens when the gun is used. We need to focus on how the legal gun got here in the first place. Governor has started an interstate gun tracing consortium, which he's asked me to chair on her behalf, where we are working with multiple states. We had a meeting last week of 9 states to figure out, to start communicating in real time about the gun trafficking. A lot of these guns are coming from Georgia, South Carolina, other parts of the country. We need to get a handle on that, and the governor is committed to that. Also, at the same time, investing in cure violence groups, spending money to invest in communities, SNUG programs, workforce development, entrepreneurial opportunities. We're spending at least over $100 million to focus on that as well, which is something that has not happened in the past. Secondly, on COVID, the governor has been very clear. We need to keep the mask mandates. We need people vaccinated. We need people boosted. We're going to continue to focus on that. As many of us have seen, there was a huge spike a few weeks ago in Omicron. Those numbers are now moving in the right direction. We're going to stay at it. We're going to stay on top of it because it is very important that we keep people safe. To our heroes, our essential workers who have worked so hard over these last 2 years, hospital workers, healthcare workers, we're spending $10 billion over the next 5 years to ensure that they get bonuses, higher wages, and also that we help to increase the number of people in the field because our health system has been stressed, and we need to make sure that we're spending some money to help fortify those efforts. Next, on education, we are spending $31.2 billion in this next budget, over a $2 billion increase over last year, fully funding foundation aid, which is important to make sure that communities, particularly those who have been left behind, are getting the resources that they need so that we can catch up to some communities who have done well for a very long time. And also historic investments in SUNY and CUNY, over $1.5 billion invested in SUNY and CUNY, with two things that I'm very interested in. One is $100 million to ensure that the staffing at CUNY and SUNY are up to speed. Many of us have heard of the number of the concerns that SUNY and CUNY have had around staffing and having teachers, adjunct professors, et cetera. We're going to invest in that, and also making sure that over the 18 campuses have childcare facilities for all the students who come to SUNY, and that there will be providing TAP for part-time students. That is to help create fairness and make sure that everyone has a seat at the table. On affordable housing, a $25 billion 5-year plan to create over 100,000 units of affordable housing, with at least 10,000 of those units being focused on supportive housing for those who are homeless and who need more support. On the climate, we are looking to increase, as you know, the CLCPA was passed, and we are focusing on making sure that we get that done. We are looking to make sure we have our state fleet, electric fleet vehicles by 2035. We are investing to make sure $500 million to invest in offshore wind. We want to be the leader in the world on offshore wind, and we want to make sure we have 2 million climate-friendly homes by 2030. Very ambitious, but what I believe will happen in the midst of this, we will be educating and providing workforce development and training for a new sort of generation of people to be able to put the solar panels on rooftops, to be able to be building these wind turbines, which would be incredible. And let me lastly say, because I know I'm about to run out of time, on ethics and voting reform. First, the governor is going to carry a constitutional amendment which will limit the top state officials to 2 terms in office. That is the governor, the lieutenant governor, the attorney general, and the comptroller. And we're going to make sure that we ban earned outside income from any of those individuals so that no one is concerned about whether or not the top leaders in the state are focusing on them. Secondly, we are going to have another constitutional amendment around the New York State Voting Rights Act so that we can deal with voter suppression. And in the state of New York, if there's any jurisdiction that has had civil rights violations, we want to make sure that any election changes that they look to make has to get state approval. That's the governor. That's the kind of governor that Kathy Hochul is. She's the first female governor in the history of New York, and she's looking to make sure that everyone has a seat at the table, everyone is included, and I look forward to answering any questions on her behalf.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. I appreciate your covering a lot of ground in just 5 minutes. So I'm going to take questions that were pre-submitted to us from members ahead of time. The first one is, how do you propose we create more equitable funding sources for New York State government and lower financial burdens on working class communities? Do you support a pied-à-terre tax? Do you support raising revenues through taxes on high earners?
So the governor at this time is not looking to increase taxes right in the middle of coming out of the pandemic. And as we're trying to bring people back to New York, last year, New York had a 300,000 person net migration. And so she wants to make sure that we bring people back to New York. And just so you know, we have a balanced budget, right? So we have a very ambitious budget, but we include reserves in that budget because we want to make sure that we don't have the same scenario that happened years past with CFE, where there was a commitment made by Governor Spitzer and then the money ran out. We want to make sure that we have resources for every single proposal, ambitious proposal that we put forward. But at this time, the governor is not looking to increase taxes. What we're looking to do is to fund important priorities in the state and make sure that everyone has an equitable opportunity for growth.
Thank you. And thanks for keeping it short. I appreciate it.
I'm doing my best.
The next question is from Richard Corman, who's here. And it was he's the co-president or president of Downtown Independent Democrats. Many of our most vulnerable in our community are at risk of displacement due to development and upzoning. Will you support and sign on to good cause eviction?
So the governor has been very clear that she is continuously working with the legislature. We're talking about a number of important items. She is not looking to on this issue and also the issue of bail reform, which are very hot topics and very important topics. She's not looking to negotiate that in the public. She wants to work with our leaders to do what makes most sense. I can say that as it relates to the issue of renters and rental arrears and some of the concerns that we have seen, we have been very aggressive with the federal government. And recently she even talked to President Biden again about getting some more ERAP money into the state. There's over $40 billion that is out there. States have not needed, some states haven't had the same need as we have. And so she has been very focused on making sure that people who have need get that need. And furthermore, by reopening the portal for ERAP, individuals are protected if they apply for ERAP from eviction. So she is looking to continue on those efforts and then work with the legislature on bills that are of importance to the community.
Thank you. I'm going to follow up that question from State Senator Brad Hoylman. And he writes, "It's so good to see my former colleague who is the president of the Senate as well as, who's now president of the Senate as well as being lieutenant governor. Thank you for urging the federal government to provide New York with an additional $1.6 billion to fund the ERAP program to protect tenants from eviction. What do you think the prospects of getting this money are?"
I think we will get the money. But let me first say that before I say that, Senator Brad Holman is one of the best legislators in the country. When I think about why tenants are also protected right now, it's because of the Tenant Safe Harbor Act that he carried and passed. I won't even get into all the other bills that he has done. He is really a legendary figure in my view, and I'm honored to be his friend. But the Tenant Safe Harbor Act, which basically says that if you have COVID-related rent arrears, you cannot be evicted at this time. And so I want to thank him for his efforts. We're fighting very hard. I believe we will eventually get the money. The President Biden has been very interested. He's coming to New York, as you know, this upcoming week to meet with the mayor. He's been very active in terms of wanting to help with the fire victims. We are seeing HUD being very supportive when it comes to increasing rental vouchers for a number of the families. And so I feel very strongly that we will get there. It's just a matter of us just continuing to push, continuing to fight. We fortunately have a Senate Majority Leader and Chuck Schumer, who is fighting hard on our behalf as well. And I have very high hopes that we'll get that money and then we'll be able to help people in need.
Thank you. Appreciate the answer. I'm going to move to a question from Eliza Orleans. She asks, why has Governor Hochul failed to use her power to grant more clemencies? There are thousands of pending applications and she's only granted 10, fewer than Donald Trump granted. For example,
Sure.
Reggie Randolph, a man who spent more than 800 days in jail after seeking NyQuil, was released from state prison last week, but he could be sent back to prison if Governor Hochul doesn't grant him clemency. Why has she not?
I would love to speak to Eliza. I know she is she is a huge activist. I follow her on social media, and I would love to talk to her offline. As you know, we try to put our team together. As you know, the governor did just get here. I understand clemency is a very important topic, and so we're getting our operation in order. I would like to see us. This is me as a lieutenant governor, not speaking. Like to see us provide more clemency, definitely where appropriate. But I would love to talk to her offline about that topic. But let me say, since while we're on this topic, in general, I feel it's very important that many of us actually know our laws. I do think that District Attorney Bragg has gotten a bad rap. I think that he put out a memo that I think politically probably I wouldn't have put out, but there's a lot of misinformation around how he's dealing with armed arrest, how he's dealing with resisting arrest. I'm sorry, armed robbery, resisting arrest. I've been hearing people say that he's not looking to prosecute a resisting arrest. He said to me personally, in cases where there's civil disobedience, he's not looking to do that, or resisting arrest is the only charge. That is very different than trying to make these sort of assertions that he's looking to not resist arrest across the board, or that he's not trying to prosecute armed robbery, or that or the way in which we're thinking the burglary is being discussed. I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, and while it's important that we have laws that keep us safe and that the district attorneys prosecute where appropriate, I do want to make sure that many of us actually know what's behind some of these laws, so that we can speak up on behalf of what is fair and just for everyone.
Thank you. A next question is from Anthony, a CODA member that was submitted. And the question is, the governor's campaign raked in nearly $22 million in a 5-month period, the largest contribution total for any filing period in New York history. Among the highest donators were real estate groups, and 15% of donors were out of state. How can the governor ensure that she will not be beholden to special interests and will work to serve the interests of working class people of New York?
Well, I think first of all, you should see how she governs and watch what she does. I mean, the point around the real estate money, she has stated in this budget that she's going to end 421A and replace it with something that increases affordability and makes that affordability permanent. And as I have seen her govern, she is looking to do what's right by everyone. I find her to be a reasonable person who listens to all sides and makes the best decisions that she can. So I don't believe that you can draw a parallel between the resources that she gets and that somehow meaning that she will not be a fighter for everyday people. I think the housing plan, the $25 billion housing plan, focusing on affordable housing for those who need it, and supportive housing. We talked. I mean, I heard Jamani talking earlier about the the support teams for the mental health for people who have mental health issues in our community. I think she's doing a really good job of making sure that we have a fair and balanced a budget where everyone is benefiting. The investments in cure violence groups, historic numbers for any governor. The investments in making sure that our CUNY system and our SUNY system, which is where equity happens. Most Black and Brown students, they're going to CUNY and SUNY. And so when you're talking about investing $1.5 billion in SUNY and CUNY, that's the kind of governor that I like to be partnered with. When you talk about foundation aid, honoring foundation aid and increasing even the amount of money that we're giving to the public school system, in addition to the $15 billion that we're getting to the federal government, and working with our local municipalities on that front. I think she has a good track record, and so I would just ask that you look at her track record, and then make a decision based on that.
Thank you. We have about 5 more minutes. I'm going to take a couple more questions. So we have a question from Michael Kramer from New Downtown Democrats, and he asks, Lower Manhattan residents may be unfairly impacted by congestion pricing fees. Can you name some exemptions that you would support?
So I believe, given, we did congestion pricing at a time that was pre-COVID. So as we are going through the procedures, and the MTA keeps us briefed on sort of where the steps are. I think once we get to the place where we have all the approvals, then we have to have a conversation around, how and when and the timing of the implementation. Now, the MTA plan considers $15 billion from congestion pricing. And so, and that's by 2024. So that's real money. So we'll figure out how that plays itself out, but we are going to be very careful, the same way that the governor has said, she doesn't think at this time we should be looking to increase taxes because we're trying to bring people back to New York and we're trying to help grow the economy. I think the same can be applied to congestion pricing, just given the amount of the impact that COVID has had, particularly on Manhattan, and what that would mean as we're trying to get people to come back to work, to then say we're going to add these extra, how we're going to deal with congestion pricing is going to be very, very important. So look, we are asking the federal government for more money. We have received resources from the federal government. We do have the Infrastructure Investment Act, which is being very helpful as well. So we're going to try to be smart about how we do this. But the key issue is, let's get people back to work. Let's get people back to New York. Let's make sure everyone's safe, and let's do it in a way that is that makes sense given the dynamics on the ground.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to take 2 more questions. From one, and I'm sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit, but a number of folks are asking good questions. So this one is coming from Alana Sivan from CODA as well. She says, thanks for your work on Less is More. Now that it's passed, what will you do to ensure its implementation is speedy and successful, given the resistance to it from some law enforcement?
That's a very good question. So working. This is near and dear to my heart. I had to. It was my blood, sweat, and tears, and a number of others, Farah Soufrant Forrest in the Assembly, and others that helped us get this through the legislature. This was not an easy bill. I actually thought it should have been a lot easier than it was. But there were a number of concerns, and there are always a lot of concerns when you're talking about criminal justice reform, where you have to educate people about the value of what we're doing. So I am working with the Catal Center and the coalition that actually helped us get this bill passed on next steps of implementation. And so just know that we will be, over the next number of months, this bill is the implementation of this bill is something that I'll be personally engaged in as Lieutenant Governor, working with DCJS and working with docs to ensure that no one is reincarcerated for a technical violation. I mean, I just think the fact that, and more importantly, and part of my urging, we've included in the budget resources for parole officers to help train them to become more like human resources and workforce development specialists, not sort of these people who are trying to see if they can reincarcerate people, but how can you help them live a better life? How can you help make sure they have the skills they need to try to get the jobs or to try to start small businesses? Parole officers should, I don't even like the word parole officer, because it just the connotation of it sort of signifies incarceration. But that aside for a second, they should be focusing on helping people reintegrate into society. We should be trying to reduce recidivism. We should try to bring recidivism to zero. And the way we do that is everyone working together to provide resources. We also, in the budget, are putting in a Jail to Jobs program, which is going to help people before they come out to work on some of the skills and training that they need. We're now going to be allowing for people, we're not allowing, once it's passed in the budget, which I'm sure it will, TAP and SUNY to be educating folks in jails and prisons, so that when they come out, we are doing everything we can to put them on the track to a better life. I think that's fair, that's just, and quite frankly, it reduces reincarceration, it reduces violence, And that to me is money well spent.
Thank you. The last question comes from a few different people. They're curious to know why the governor was unable to make the forum. So I was hoping you could address that briefly.
Yeah, so unfortunately, the governor's schedule has been so complicated. As you know, we are in the middle of nor'easter. It's a huge sort of task for her, particularly dealing with some of the key issues that are going on right now around trying to keep all New York State safe. She's dealing with storm briefings and dealing with a number of individuals around doing that. So she would have loved to be here. I apologize on her behalf, but we do need to make sure that streets are plowed and that we're giving our local municipalities all the resources and the support that they need, so that this is not, we don't have any loss of life or fatalities, unnecessary occurrences during this nor'easter.
All right, that's all the time we have for today. I appreciate all your answers and staying a little late with us today.
Anytime. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Very important clubs to our, and I just love the activism and the energy and the volunteering. And I mean, I used to, I started a group called Harlem for Obama when I was, before I was elected, and just, that the energy of just fighting for a better democracy. I hope we're doing you proud, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for attending the Downtown Democratic Club's primary candidate forum. So thank you all. Have a wonderful weekend and stay safe out there.